everyone. My name is Ronald Price. I am the Chief Compliance and Privacy Officer here at Marlborough Hospital. I want to welcome you to a series of videos that I'm going to be rolling out each month pertaining to HIPAA privacy training. It's important for us to make sure that all employees are aware of what to report, when to report, and how to report. So it's our hope that these training sessions will assist you in getting a better understanding of exactly what the HIPAA privacy rule is and why we require reporting. Okay, let's get started. First, the general overview of the relevant laws, starting with the acronym HIPAA. HIPAA stands for the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. And the interesting thing about that acronym is that there's not a week that goes by where I don't get at least one email that has it spelled with two P's instead of two A's. And the irony is that that first A that gets dropped, which stands for accountability, is actually the most important word within the acronym because it speaks to the enforcement element of it, that third bullet. So HIPAA is made up of three rules. You have the privacy rule, the security rule, both overseen by the Office of Civil Rights. There's also a transactions rule that's overseen by CMS. But for the purposes of our discussion, we'll just be focusing on the privacy rule and the security rule. All right, so I started working as a privacy officer back in 2006, and back then HIPAA didn't really have any teeth. And then along came the HITECH Act as a part of the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act. Some of you may recall that. And that was a game changer. Ultimately, it dramatically increased the penalties that healthcare organizations could be exposed to for a breach. By way of example, prior to HITECH, if somebody had willfully neglected the reporting of a reportable breach, they might have been assessed up to $500. After HITECH, they could be assessed up to $1.5 million for each incident. And that can actually add up pretty quickly, and that's why we need to take this very seriously. It also expanded consumer rights, as well as the ability to receive PHI electronically. Yet most importantly, it changed the breach standard that we, the privacy officer, actually assess to determine whether or not there's been a breach. In addition to federal laws, there are also state laws. And here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, we have the Massachusetts Identity Theft Law and Data Protection Law. And this is a law that's more stringent than the federal HIPAA privacy rule. And ultimately, if you have a more stringent state law, the state law is going to govern, as is the case here. All right, so let's talk about some of the key concepts we'll cover. First, PHI. That's something that you'll need to be very aware of. It stands for Protected Health Information. And that is what we're obligated to provide protections over and ensure that we're not allowing anyone access or exposure to unless they have a legitimate business purpose if they're an employee or as otherwise allowed under the HIPAA privacy rule. We also have the privacy notice that we are required to make available to patients, i.e. they need to be able to get a copy of it. The minimum necessary role is something I want everyone to pay careful attention to because this really speaks to what you do in your day-to-day work here and the thing that you need to be most in compliance with on a day-to-day basis. We have patient access, and this has become very relevant because we have a new law making its way through the works. The ONC recently passed a law called the Information Blocking Rule. And this is a game changer because it's going to prevent hospitals from blocking the release of medical records. And ultimately, that may end up increasing the number of amendments to medical records once patients start receiving them. And so this is an area that, again, got expanded under HITECH, and it really got codified in the OCR Administrative Code under the Omnibus Rule that was passed, or at least went into effect September 25th, 2013. Don't ask me why I remember that. All right, so we have statutorily protected information, sensitive information, as well as patient safety and care, i.e. victims of crimes and prisoners. Okay, So each and every one of you will be granted what's referred to as role-based access. And what this means is that you will be allowed access that you require in order to do your job. So some of you may be working with Epic, and as such may have access to medical records. Others may not have access to medical records. The important thing to note here is that you can only access the minimum amount of information necessary to do your job. And so let's say you need to get Johnny Smith's date of birth, and ultimately you need to go on the record. It's not okay to continue reading down and say, I wonder what Johnny Smith was in here about. This is a great lead-in to make you aware that your actions are being monitored. And it's not personal. Rather, there are applications that are constantly scanning in the background and trying to determine whether or not any of us are accessing medical records for reasons other than a business purpose. So this was an email that you may recall seeing last year. It was sent out to everyone's email, and it speaks to a increasingly growing concern within this healthcare system as a whole. This was directed to Marlborough Hospital, and it's a concept referred to as snooping. And it can take place either when an employee looks at another employee's medical records, again, without a business reason to do so, or it can occur whenever an employee looks at a household member's records, again, without a business reason. So ultimately the key here, and I'm sure you're starting to see a clear pattern here, that unless there's a business reason to access records, it will result, or at least may result, and frankly might likely result, in what's referred to as a reportable breach. So I have all of the items listed here in terms of what records may constitute snooping. I'll make the slide deck available to everyone. Yet again, for now, I'm just introducing the concept to you to make you aware of what is not permissible. So the system policies and procedures require the reporting of a breach. This is important. What this means is that whenever we come across a non-permitted disclosure of PHI or PII, personally identifiable information, we are required to report that. And so let's say you have somebody who inadvertently hands the wrong patient summary to a patient, and that patient walks out of the hospital and they have somebody else's information. A very common way we find out about that is the patient will actually call when they get home and say, hey, I've got somebody's information here. That actually resulted in a reportable breach. And the reason why that needs to be reported is because all reportable breaches need to be reported to the Office of Civil Rights. And the easiest way to remember this is if you don't report it and that patient ultimately decides to report it to OCR, we could be in a lot of trouble, and if it ends up ultimately being identified as someone not having reported it, it can result in disciplinary actions. So it is because of this that we are required to report all incidents immediately. There are a number of ways you can report it. You can call the Marlborough Hospital Privacy Office number. You can call me directly, or you can report through our Ethics Point confidential reporting system. This is a third-party company that actually, in turn, calls us, whoever the appropriate privacy officer is, and then we're responsible for investigating that incident. So again, this was an introduction to HIPAA privacy. It's my hope that I will be able to roll these out every single month. So welcome to the HIPAA privacy world. I hope we're going to have some exciting videos for you in the future, and eventually work into face-to-face presentations just as soon as that becomes available for us to do so. Thank you very much.